I want to invite you to be turning to Job chapter 33. Job is the book right before Psalms, and I would encourage you to follow along in chapter 33. We're going to look at several passages in this particular chapter in just a few moments as we get into our lesson today. I'm sure you've felt the unseen hand of whoever this is that's been sowing seeds of discord among us as a people, as a nation. And this has been going on for a long time. The seeds of division have been occurring over a lot of different issues over a long period of time. Starts off with pretty mundane things. It talks about the divisiveness, deals with things like political issues. It deals with mundane things like which color are you going to wear, crimson or orange? And if you pick the wrong color, you're in the bad place with me. And I think I told you when we moved to Alabama from Texas many years ago, it's about 2 days into our new home, and people were starting to say, "Who you for?" And I said, "What are you talking about? Are you for Bama or are you for Auburn?" "Oh, well, I'm for the Florida Gators." So I had two enemies instead of one. But that's how divisive we get. And of course, it's been escalating now. We're divided over all kinds of issues today, racially, politically, all kinds of things that are happening today. And it just seems to be that this divisiveness is ramping up to a great degree. I want to talk about the sameness of us today for just a few minutes. And I want to go back to August the 28th, 1963, to begin this lesson. I was going to read some of this speech that Dr. King had, but then I thought, no, it'd be better to let it be in his own words, or at least most of what I wanted to read. So we're going to listen to Dr. King for just a minute, because what Dr. King started out doing in the 60s was not only courageous, but it was right. And Dr. King tried to unify people. And today we're not being too united. Let's listen to Dr. King for just a minute.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream. My four little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted. Every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it today.
That march on Washington was the largest civil rights march probably ever. I'm not sure about that, but over 250,000 people gathered at the Lincoln Memorial to hear Dr. King's speech. These are words that are, you didn't see it in person on the television or in person in D.C., you know these words. You've heard these over the years, and you understand the importance of what those words said. Basically, we're all the same. In Psalm 133, behold how good and pleasant it is when brothers dwell in unity. I just got back from visiting my daughter and her family. And it was a lot of fun when the boys were getting along. It was a lot of stress when they weren't. So I can understand when God looks down on us and he sees unity, how nice that is, what a good feel he gets for his brothers and sisters or his children to dwell together in unity. In Acts 17, he said he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth. All of us go back to one man, to Adam. And what a marvelous thing it is about our God, who's able to be so creative in all. I don't know how it all works with the gene pool of Adam, how creative God has been to produce multiple versions of Adam in all of us. We have different hair color. We have different hair texture. We have different skin color. We have different characteristics about us. But we all go back to one man. You see, there's one race in the world, the human race. And there's lots of different people groups that make up that one race. And there's a unifying thing about that as we look at our differences, but we also look to see that we are the same. There's neither Jew nor Greek, neither slave nor free, neither male nor female, for you're all one in Christ Jesus. And if you're Christ, then you're Abraham's offspring, heirs according to the promise. I want you to notice a couple of things in there. First of all, in Christ, none of the outside stuff matters. But number two, we are all heirs of Abraham. You get that? That in Christ, Jesus brings us into the story of Abraham. And I may not be a physical descendant from Abraham, but because of Jesus, I'm a spiritual descendant of Abraham. And we've been grafted into those roots in Romans chapter 11, those Jewish roots that go all the way back. There needs to be among all of us, over all the issues that we're facing, a unifying theme that pulls us together. How do we get there? I want us to look at the book of Job, chapter 33. Because Elihu is speaking here. And in chapter 32, Elihu has waited his turn to talk to Job. Job has his calamities. Remember all that story. And in those calamities, 3 friends and Elihu come to visit Job. The 3 friends keep telling Job, you've messed up, you've done something wrong, or God wouldn't be punishing you. Job says, I didn't do anything wrong. Elihu finally gets to his time. As the youngest, he waits his turn. But in beginning of chapter 32, he's angry at Job because Job justified himself rather than God. And he's angry at the 3 friends because they didn't give Job a good answer. And he says, now let me speak. And so Elihu begins talking to Job about some issues. Now let me just do a little parenthesis here, because the book of Job fascinates me. One of the things that the book of Hebrews says about Jesus is that he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. The book of Job tells us that's how God is. God's the same all the way through. Now, the book of Job was written, I don't know when it was written, but it's a very ancient story. Okay? So it may predate Abraham. So here's this story that was passed down orally and then written down so we would have it. And in this story, in the story of Job, there are things about God that are all the way through the book that are in both sides of the Bible. For instance, this book the story predates the law of Moses. And yet embedded in this book are the 10 Commandments. Isn't that interesting? That prior to the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, God says to Job and his friends, there are at least these 10 commandments you have to keep. And they're all in there. And other things. So when Elihu begins talking to Job about these issues that he's facing, not only are they there for Job, they're there for us too. So let's look at the first thing. There is an equality among all of us. Regardless of the divisions, regardless of whether you wear orange or crimson, there's an equality to everyone. I know that's heresy, but there's an equality to everybody over everything. Look at chapter 33, starting at verse 1. But now hear my speech, O Job. Listen to all my words. Behold, I open my mouth, the tongue in my mouth speaks. My words declare the uprightness of my heart, and what my lips know they speak sincerely. Being as honest and sincere to you as I can, Job. The Spirit of God made me. The breath of the Almighty gives me life. Answer me if you can. Set your words in order before me. Take your stand. Behold, I am toward God as you are. I too was formed from a piece of clay. Behold, no fear of me need terrify you. My pressure will not be heavy upon you. Job, I've got some things to say to you. And I want you to understand something, that I'm speaking sincerely because I am like you. I was made like you. I was given breath and life by God just like you were. And I think that's really important for us to remember as we think about, and as Dr. King quoted here from our Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. We're endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We have been made the same. The same God created you, created me. The same God that gave you life, gave me life, gave you gifts, gave me gifts. We're created by the same God. What does that tell us to do? Just treat each other well. That's what Elihu's trying to do with Job. The friends are bashing Job. Elihu comes along and he says, I'm just like you are. I'm not passing great judgment on you. I'm not condemning you. I'm not putting you down. I'm just like you are. So we treat each other well and with kindness. And we, as Paul says in Galatians 6, bear one another's burdens and fulfill the law of Christ, because we all have the same problem. All, as it is written, none is righteous, no, not one. No one understands, no one seeks for God. All have turned aside together. They've all become worthless. No one does good, not even one. We're all in the same boat. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Now look at verse 14. In addition, Elihu reminds us that we don't listen to God. For God speaks in one way, and in two, though man does not perceive it. You ever feel like that? How many times have you prayed, God guide me, God lead me, God show me the way? And then you go, I don't see, I don't hear. And that's kind of how we are many times. That God is speaking to us, but we're not listening. We've gotten deaf to God in so many ways. Man asked Jesus, what's the greatest commandment? Jesus gives him two, puts them together. Greatest commandment, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Be'ahavta, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. And he says, and the second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Rabbis have said over the years there are two commandments in the Bible, the rest is commentary. Love God, love your neighbor. Everything else is just enhancing those two commands. Jesus puts those commands together. And he begins by quoting what we call the Shema. Hear, O Israel. And that very first word is to hear. And it's not just audible hearing, it's hearing in order to obey. Hear, listen, do what I'm telling you to do. Love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. And then in Leviticus he says, love your neighbor as yourself. But so often we don't hear. So often we have a distortion of our self-pride that gets in the way. Job's issue was pride in himself. Oh, he kept the law blamelessly. I didn't do anything wrong. Externally, he didn't do anything wrong. He'd been giving, he'd been obeying, he'd been doing all these things, but he had a problem. The problem was the pride in himself. You know, if I'm prideful, I don't listen to God. I listen to me. And Job was listening to himself instead of God. So were the friends. We have all the answers. Job, the answer is you messed up and God's punishing you. They had the prideful answer, we're too smart for God. We don't need him. But then there are distractions. Even in good things, we sometimes get distracted from the better things. Martha was distracted from her serving, and Mary chose the better part, to listen to Jesus. So often we can get distracted by any number of things, and then we can be deceived. Paul says this, the coming of the lawless one is by the activity of Satan, with all power and false signs and wonders, and with all wicked deception for those who are perishing, because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. There's a lot of deception floating around, intentional and otherwise, in our world today. Did you hear recently of the CNN anchor Don Lemons saying Jesus wasn't perfect? Everybody knows Jesus wasn't perfect. Deception. Erroneous. Jesus came into the world as the perfect Son of God. He's the only one to fulfill the Torah, the law of Moses, and the prophets completely. He came and he lived it out, and yet in our society today, we shrug it off. And instead of embracing the teachings of Jesus, we start calling evil good and good evil. Somebody wrote this, first we overlook evil, then we permit evil, then we legalize evil, then we promote evil, then we celebrate evil, then we persecute those who still call it evil. Do you think that might be going on today? We're in a society today where evil has become good and good has become evil, and we're not listening to God. We have become a divisive people as a result. Elihu goes on. Look at verses 16 to 18. Then he opens the ears of men and terrifies them with warnings, that they may turn man aside from his deed and cut off pride from man. He keeps back his soul from the pit, his life from perishing by the sword. God has salvation for people. God intends to keep us out of the pit. And this salvation is for all ages, and it has come by the hand of the Lord, not by us. We're not smart enough, we're not wise enough, we don't have enough logic to figure out what we need to do on our own to be saved, because sin is the big problem. In fact, the cross was foolishness to some and a stumbling block to others when it was preached. And yet God provides a way of salvation and a way of warning us about what's coming. Let me pause for a minute and ask you a very serious question. Do you fear hell? Elihu talks about God warning us. Jesus talked more about hell than he did about heaven. And there's a reality there that we have forgotten. And there is a world that is headed for hell. Because they don't know Jesus, they're not listening to God, and they're not aware of the warnings that God has given. It's a real deal. This is the reality of the world that we're living in. God provided a way, but people are not aware. People aren't listening for that way of salvation. Look at verses 22 through 24. His soul draws near the pit, and his life to those who bring death. If there be for him an angel, a mediator, one of the 1,000, to declare to a man what is right for him, and he's gracious to him, and says, deliver him from going down into the pit, I have found a ransom. Let his flesh become fresh with youth. God made a payment, paid a ransom for us. Jesus came into the world and he said, I didn't come to be served, but to serve and to give my life a ransom for many. Greater love has no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do whatever I command you. God commends his love toward us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. There's the ransom. There's the price that was paid. And that price was not paid for a specific group of people. It's paid for all of us. We all can benefit from what Jesus has done. A couple went to one of their favorite places in England. It was an outlet shop for one of the factories that made china. And they got into the shop, and over on one of the tables was the ultimate lowest price sale. Every item on that table was £3 in value. So the man and wife ran over to the table to see what kind of deal they could get, and the man held up 2 pieces of china. And he looked at one, and he could see the flaws in it. He understood why they would mark that down so severely. But he looked at the other one, and he looked it over, and he couldn't find anything wrong with that little piece of china. So he took it to the clerk, and he said, "This one is flawed. I can't find anything wrong with this one." She picked it up and looked, and there was a tiny little flaw in the china. And she pointed it out to him. And he said, "Why is it that you mark this one with all the flaws, so many of the flaws, down, and you mark this one with one tiny little flaw down to the same price? You could get more for this one than for this one." She says, No, you don't understand. Every piece of china must be absolutely perfect to sell it at retail price. From our point of view, there's no difference in the 2 pieces. Both fall short of our exact specifications of perfection. I have many flaws. You have few flaws. But we all fall short of the Maker's specification of perfection. All of us are in need of this ransom, of this price that Jesus had paid. And it doesn't matter what the division is. This is not a skin color issue, it's a content of character issue. Whatever the division is, it's not that division, it's a character issue that's at stake here. And all of us are flawed. Don't be judgmental. We're all in the same boat. All of us have the issues. Jesus is the key. Someone has said the ground is level at the foot of the cross. Regardless of our people group, regardless of our status in society, regardless of how much money's in the bank, which college we went to or didn't go to, we stand at the foot of the cross and we're all the same. But here's an interesting thing, I think. I don't think we really come to Jesus until we realize there's no other way. I think we try a lot of stuff. We finally realize He's the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by Him. I don't think we really come to Jesus, really come to Jesus, until we find out that we can't live without Him. We can come to church, but we can't really have Jesus till there's nothing else. Humorous story, doubt it's true, probably some preacher story. Man's baptizing another man, preacher's baptizing a guy, puts him under the water, and he holds him down. The man begins to flail, finally forces his way up, takes a deep breath, and he says to the preacher, "What in the world were you doing to me?" The preacher says to the man, "What did you want the most when I held you under?" "I wanted to breathe. I wanted air." And he said, until you want Jesus that day, you can't have it. And I think that's the key. To want Jesus, and to want to be like Jesus, period. And that's an amazing challenge for Western civilization that thinks we don't need God, but we do. We're going to stand and sing an invitation song this morning. If you need to respond, either to put him on in baptism, and I won't hold you under, we want to encourage you to come. If you need prayer for some reason, this is a good time as well. Let's stand, let's sing.